So I've been using the Pixel 7 Pro and the Pixel Watch daily for like about a week now, and I got some thoughts that I want to share with you guys. Now, some of those thoughts you might agree with, and some of them you might not, especially when it comes to the Pixel Watch, because I've got some mildly hot takes about this smartwatch that I'm gonna save for the latter half of this video. The Pixel 7 Pro is Google's latest and greatest flagship that by and large is a refresh, not a redesign of the previous phone. And this is kind of a trend that we've seen with nearly every major phone manufacturer this year. Samsung, OnePlus, and even Apple have had relatively conservative updates to their phones in 2022. It's not a bad thing, it just makes for a somewhat boring year of smartphone tech. But the Pixel 7 Pro is anything but boring. In fact, in a lot of ways, it's one of the best Android phones out there. Last year, I really wanted to love the Pixel 6 Pro, but even though Google did a lot of things right, there were still just way too many bugs and issues with the phone for me to continue using it long term. I had issues with the fingerprint reader, inconsistencies with the battery life and the auto brightness feature, and I even had like overheating and performance related issues from time to time. The Pixel 7 Pro, on the other hand, feels like a completely different phone, even though it looks a lot like the 6 Pro. I will say too, I'm actually not really a fan of the new exterior design changes. I know a lot of people are, but I really don't like the brushed aluminum camera array. I think it was a lot cleaner looking without seeing the weird pill and circle shaped cutouts. Plus, it's only been a week and this thing is already scratched. I have a feeling that within a few years it's gonna start looking like the back of my old iPods. The other thing I didn't like is that the speakers in the 7 Pro are actually a little bit worse than the ones in the 6 Pro, and the left and right balance between the two speakers is off. More sound comes from the bottom firing speaker than the one at the top, which sounds a little bit terrible in my opinion. But that's actually where my complaints with this phone end for the most part. Google's new Tensor G2 chip seems to have made huge improvements across the board for the overall experience of this phone. I'm not getting any more performance or overheating issues, and the big one for me is that the fingerprint reader in the 7 Pro is way more consistent. It's still not the fastest one on the market. I think that title belongs to Samsung's Ultra lineup, but at least I'm not getting frustrated or annoyed anymore with getting denied access to my phone. Plus, Google has brought back facial recognition this year, which is just as quick or sometimes even faster than using the fingerprint reader. By the way, you can pick up these wallpapers from the $2 wallpaper pack on my website. The link will be in the description down below if you're interested. As usual, the things that I'm most excited to try out when I get a new Pixel are the cameras. Now, the physical hardware is actually mostly unchanged. I believe they did swap out the front-facing camera for a slightly different one, and they've also added focus to the ultra-wide camera, but that's about it. The biggest changes from the 6 Pro are software related, and the two highlights are the cinematic blur and macro focus features. Cinematic blur is a lot like iPhone's cinematic mode. It blurs the background in video. Unfortunately, it's limited to 1080p, but for videos that live on your phone and for social media, it's a fun little feature that I think a lot of people will want to play with. The macro focus feature isn't its own separate mode. It's just what Google is calling their close focusing ultra-wide system. Once you get too close to something for the main camera to actually focus on, the phone will switch to the ultra-wide camera and it'll tell you that the macro mode is turned on. It's only a 12 megapixel sensor, but you can get some really fun and interesting shots with it. I always have a lot of fun shooting with the Pixels. Google's image processing pipeline is among the best out there, and I tend to prefer the photos that my 7 Pro takes over any of the other flagships that I've tested this year. So while this 7 Pro isn't a monumental update over the 6 Pro, and you probably shouldn't upgrade if you already have the phone from last year, it is many small steps in the right direction for Google, and I have been enjoying my time with it so far. But what about the watch? Okay, this might get a little bit spicy. So this watch has been rumored and leaked for a long time. I mean, we saw images of it back in December of last year. I think the biggest issue is that it's been talked about and hyped up for so long that when it released, it was kind of just underwhelming. Don't get me wrong, this watch is very Google, and that's a good thing. I mean, it's got a very playful looking design with that bubble-shaped display glass, and it's actually one of the most comfortable smartwatches that I've owned. The haptic feedback is good, the crown that sticks out from the side of the watch is clicky and smooth to rotate, and the actual performance of the watch has been surprisingly just fine for me, even though it has like a 4-year-old Exynos CPU. But there are a few things about it that just come so close to ruining the experience that I think it's gonna turn a lot of people away. The biggest one and the most obvious one is the battery life. even in the keynote, Google claimed up to 24 hours of battery life. And we all know that keynote figures are usually at least a little bit exaggerated. With the always on display mode turned on, the watch survives a full day, but like just barely. I don't think I could even use the watch for sleep tracking during the night unless I put it on the charger just before bed. And for 2022, that kind of battery life in a smartwatch isn't really cutting it. It's not really desirable. Not to mention that it barely gets a full day now, so imagine how bad it's gonna be in a couple of years when the battery degrades from being charged once or twice a day. A lot of that probably has to do with the size. I mean, this is a small watch. My wrists aren't huge, but the Pixel Watch looks small. Too small even. If they had offered a 45mm version along with this 41mm version to fit a bigger battery in there, I think it wouldn't be as much of an issue. As for the screen itself, I mean, it's not bad. It's an AMOLED display, and Google has done a great job with the faces that come with the watch. All of them have a black background that blends seamlessly with the bubble-shaped display and gives it a nice premium look. The problem is that the bezels on this thing are absolutely huge. I've seen a lot of people say that it isn't an issue because of how well Google has cleverly disguised all the UI to bleed off the edges towards the bezels, but even if that is the case, when it comes time to actually view content on this watch, you run into a problem. Like when you get a notification, for example. The notification banner at the top is so large that most of the actual content of the notification is buried beneath the bezel, and you have to scroll down to actually see more of the content. At most, you can only read like 1 to 2, maybe 3 lines of a text message before you need to scroll down, which I find personally annoying. Also, custom watch faces with any sort of background at all look pretty bad in general, and given the already mediocre battery life, I'd suggest that you probably should just stick with the faces that were provided with it. Most of them, to their credit, are actually really nice, and they match the design of the watch perfectly. To be honest, I haven't really had enough time with the watch to really test out the fitness features in detail, and I'm not sure I'm even going to get to, because even though the Pixel Watch has a really nice design overall and it's a good first attempt for Google, it's painfully apparent that it's just that. It's a good first try that leaves me hoping for a better version in the future. If you're one of those people that got one of these bundled with the 7 or the 7 Pro for a great discount, then it might be worth it for you, and it might be perfectly fine for you too. But with an MSRP at $350 US, there are better options out there. The Galaxy Watch 5, for example, starts at like $280, and even though it's cheaper, it is actually a better smartwatch in my opinion. Sorry. Anyway, hope you liked the video. Thanks for watching, and as always, have a great day.